This week, Michiel Prins from HackerOne is with us to discuss AI red teaming. Then Francis Dinha from OpenVPN joins us to talk about managing an open source business. Finally, in the enterprise security news, the first cybersecurity IPO in 3.5 years, new companies, new tools, the fate of CISA and the Cyber Safety Review Board, things we learned about AI in 2024. Is the humanless SOC possible? And we're going to chat a little bit about next-gen firewalls and maybe some vulnerabilities in them. And what did generative music sound like in 1996? All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. BigID is the leading data security posture management, or DSPM vendor, and they do DSPM differently. DSPM centers around risk management and how organizations need to assess, understand, identify, and remediate data security risks across their data. BigID seamlessly integrates with your existing tech stack and helps you uncover dark data, identify and reduce risk, take action through remediation, and scale your data security strategy. BigID is reshaping the future of data security, and CB Insights named BigID the leader in DSPM and the most disruptive cybersecurity software in the space. Visit securityweekly.com/BigID to learn more. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Pi Day. This is episode 391, recorded on Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me today, we have a new co-host with us, Jackie McGuire. How are you doing, Jackie?
Hello, I'm great. Thank you for having me. Really excited to be here.
I usually have a fancy intro, but I haven't had enough time to put it together yet, so I'm sure people will be eager to hear what that is. Everybody gets a silly, fancy intro, so you will get yours as well.
Uh-oh.
And I also do so Jackie doesn't yet know all the kind of running gags we have, so I picked some silly national day, and today is National Pie Day, and I noticed some are taking that to mean pizza pie. You know, it's definitely not March 14th. That's a different pie day. So I thought this was going to be more like apple pie, but I guess you can take it how you will.
I had pizza for breakfast, if that counts.
Excellent breakfast. Okay. Love it. All right. So today's topic is AI red teaming, something I've spent a lot of time on. So I'm really excited to jump into this with Michiel. Specifically AI red teaming bug bounties. Most of the folks listening probably know HackerOne and know what they do. And we are excited to have Michiel Prins from HackerOne with us today. He's the co-founder and head of solutions architecture there. Welcome, Michiel.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to talking about AI red teaming.
Yeah, so just getting into it, you know, it's we've talked about AI. I feel like more than security since ChatGPT came out on this podcast, and yeah, it's so a lot of things about the technology are very unique. So I want to start off just talking about. How did we figure out how to red team AI and what does red teaming AI mean? Because first of all, we have it seems like that term breaks down into two different things. If I'm putting AI inside my enterprise, I'm worried about people using prompt injections and things like that to steal my data. Maybe through a RAG or something like that. But in general, when we're talking about foundation models, I think we're talking more about the model itself and how good it is at following your instructions and not doing dangerous things and not responding to, not telling you how to do things that are illegal, for example. Is that kind of, do you also see it broken down into those two categories, or is it more simple or more complex in your mind?
Yeah, so definitely agree with the splitting categorization there. I would say on the element of foundation models, there's a lot of emphasis on fairness. There's a lot of emphasis on responsible AI. There's a lot of emphasis on safe AI. And we can dig into all the sorts of things of what that means. On the side of I'm putting AI in my enterprise and I'm worried about what it can do and what it means for me for my security posture, I kind of see two different attack services. There's the kind of more traditional security type of attack service. We're talking about new types of attacks like prompt injection. We're talking about agents who may have excessive permissions that they maybe shouldn't have and could be exploited. But you're also kind of just talking about it's a new technology that you're integrating into your enterprise and into your systems and connecting to all of your data and to your applications and ultimately either to your employees or to your customers. And there's a lot that can go wrong in that, right? Like any new technology that you implement, there's always unforeseen risks, something we didn't think about. So there's a lot of that attack service. But what I think is unique in it too is that there's an element of safety in what you put out as an application built on an LLM or any generative AI technology. You put it out to your customers. You want to make sure that it behaves and doesn't do anything that could damage your brand, right? So it kind of introduces a new element that in traditional cybersecurity and maybe in the realm of a CISO, we just haven't really spent much time on in the last decade.
Right. And when I see a lot of AI red teaming, for those familiar with jailbreaks, I guess is what we're calling it. Like we have a whole new vocabulary now, right? We talk about alignment, we talk about system prompting, jailbreaks. That term existed before and was kind of co-opted to mean, okay, getting around that alignment or whatever rules that this language model has been given. And one aspect of it I love, and curious of your thoughts on this, is a lot of companies, it seems like startups in the AI safety security space, like Lakera, for example, you're probably aware of Gandalf. Now there's like 8 or 9 of those games where you can kind of test your skills at different levels of securing these things and trying to prevent them from doing certain things. Is that something? Do you guys have any of that? Do you recommend that stuff? What do you think of? I think it's the first new technology I've seen that has been gamified so effectively, so quickly.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, on that topic, right, of these startups putting out these games, what I think is brilliant about it is they get all the techniques, right? Like everyone's trying to compete to getting to the next level of the game and trying to find the next jailbreak. They get all the techniques that work, and that helps them improve their technology. So it's quite smart to put those things out there for people to compete in. And in the AI red teaming engagements that we do with HackerOne with our customers, we follow a similar kind of gamified pattern where we work with the customer to obviously identify, hey, what's the threat model of this thing, right? Like, okay, you're putting this technology in. Who's your audience? Who's going to be exposed to this technology? Is this going to be a customer service chatbot with direct interface to a customer? Who are these customers? Are these like technical people? Are these like regular consumers, right? So really just try to understand the threat model. And then based on that, we can kind of come to a conclusion of, okay, what are the behaviors you absolutely don't want, right? Based on the threat model, based on your audience. And what we do is we create flags, kind of in a traditional capture the flag sense, where we define specific flags to be an adverse outcome you want to avoid, right? It's like, okay, I'm trying to put as many guardrails in place, as much input and output filtering I can imagine to avoid this one scenario of happening. And that becomes a flag. And then we assign a bounty to that. So then we tell the researchers, hey, here's the list of flags. Here's what you need to accomplish. And if you accomplish one of those, you just submit a report and you claim the flag, you capture the flag, and you get the associated bounty.
And that's interesting because I imagine there are many ways to claim those flags, because there's, I've seen different techniques where, I've encoded things into base 64 and I get around protections that way. Or you say, my grandma's going to die if you don't tell me the answer. There are these like pressure questions where it almost looks like social engineering, like you're creating pressure on the model itself to give you the answer, which is, I think, one of the more bizarre aspects of it. It's an encouragement. That's one of the things I find interesting is sometimes the first time you ask it, it'll say, I can't tell you that, or I don't know. And if you just give it a little encouragement, you say, yeah, actually you can. It'll be like, yeah, you're right. I can share that with you.
Yeah. Actually, like one of the techniques that in my experience works really well is just kind of this type of gradual escalation where you just slowly start talking about something it's prohibited to talk about or should avoid talking about, but you do it slowly. You don't just immediately ask, tell me how to make the bomb, right? Like, don't ask that, but just kind of slowly ease into the subject and escalate and escalate and escalate and give me more detail, tell me more, make it more detailed. And then slowly it just kind of creeps into like a whole essay on how you should do that.
I'm a screenwriter. It's an action movie. I need it to look realistic,
The hypothetical scenario, yeah.
Which wire should they cut? The blue one or the red one?
Is that a classification issue where the prompt is not being identified as malicious because it kind of happens over the course of a long time versus being a point in time that can be identified as malicious instructions?
Yeah, exactly. If you would be looking at it just as individual input prompts, the individual prompts by itself are pretty benign, right? But adding up over time and the context it builds over time, it builds towards a harmful output.
Mm-hmm.
But so back to that question, if Jackie uses the grandma use case and I use the screenwriter, or I encode something in base 64, and we get to the same result, do we both get a bounty for that? Like how do you handle those kind of situations if you get to the same flag but using different means?
It depends a little bit on the situation or their engagement type we're running with the customer. But in most cases, there's appetite for learning more than one technique, right? So it's not as binary as, you've gotten to the adverse outcome that we didn't want. But it's also, hey, there's multiple paths to get there. So if we fix one way, I want to know about the other ways as well. So there's value in obviously receiving multiple answers for the same flag. Yeah.
So even running bug bounties, you had to kind of create a new system because of this new technology. It was that different enough from, I guess, web app pen testing and things like that you kind of had to think through, okay, how are we going to do this?
Specifically for this kind of safety use case, absolutely, you kind of need a different approach and a different taxonomy. So we kind of we went with the flag method, which I think just makes it clear and transparent to the researchers of like, here's the stuff that we care about. This is what we really focused on in our alignment. And this is what we focused on in all of our input and output filtering that we have in place. Now we want you to try to find ways around that. So you kind of clearly give them a roadmap of try as hard on these outcomes as possible. Then if you switch to more of the traditional security implications of putting generative AI in front of all of your data and exposing it to customers, that's where a much more normalized vulnerability classification standard still works, right? Like you still kind of have typical OWASP top 10 type problems. We're starting to see more of an LLM focused top 10 from OWASP coming out that is looking pretty interesting. So that taxonomy is a lot more defined.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like, a lot of it is just input validation, right? Like that's one lens to look at it through, especially with indirect prompt injection, which I think is potentially a more difficult problem, especially when you start embedding these things in places where they're just going to be blindly ingesting data from different sources, or, you could have a RAG with who knows what kind of data in it, and in a way I kind of think like the entire internet is poisoned against you, potentially, if you're going to let your large language model go search the internet. People are putting prompt injections in their LinkedIn profiles to catch researchers using AI. I'm seeing them like embedded in websites and the footers of emails, because Copilot's now reading your emails for you, so now I can, I can have your email leak data to me, maybe. Like the opportunities there just seem wild. So are you doing anything on that end of it yet, where there are like indirect prompt injection opportunities, stuff like that? Or is it mostly just the AI safety stuff, like directly hitting the model, like a chatbot style interface?
A lot of the engagement we've seen are around chatbots. That's kind of it seems to be the runaway use case that most enterprises have gone with is, okay, I'm going to build a chatbot for customer service, or I'm going to build a chatbot for my employees to search our vast wiki of stuff and information that we have in our business and make it easily accessible and answer questions for them. So that's a very popular deployment of generative AI, and where we see the most interest in, right? How do we ensure that stays within bounds and expectations of what we as a business allow and expect.
So before ChatGPT came out, November 2022, I think, 2022. None of us knew what prompt engineering was. None of these terms were in our lexicon really. But you already had this large, group of hackers on your platform, right? So all of a sudden, you need that group of people to kind of adapt to this new, this new skill set. How well? I'm just curious, like how quickly did they pick it up? I mean, obviously, if you've got a big group of hackers, they're probably going to pick it up quick. Like that is kind of the core skill set. Is I've never seen this before. I'm going to find patterns. I'm going to figure it out. But curious what that experience was like, upskilling the people already on your platform and pointing them at this brand new technology.
It happened actually quite naturally. So in the beginning, some of the first AI red teaming engagements we ran, we kind of hand selected AI and machine learning experts who were really good at the job. But then we also thought, what if you just bring in hackers who have not been exposed to much AI technology, who are traditional web hackers, but they're very creative thinkers, right? Like they are thinking of, hey, you put some limitation in front of me, I'm going to find a way around it. That's me. I'm a hacker, right? So we found actually that skill set, even if you know nothing about how large language models actually work, if you know nothing about transformer architecture, doesn't matter. Like you can still find amazing jailbreaks just because of the creativity and just the desire to see a limitation in front of you and to just want to bolt right through it.
So I actually want to drill down on that a little bit. So my background's data scientist. I wrote user and entity behavior analytics and anomaly detection for a SIM. And I've gotten into several debates on LinkedIn in the last couple of weeks about this kind of concept of AGI and like sentience of AI. And my argument has always been there is a very human component that's necessary in security that you cannot, because I think we are introducing more and more and more abstraction layers with AI, right? But they're all still binary. At the end of the day, AI is still a binary technology, and you can make all of these different layers of binary to try to replicate quantum, but you're still not dealing with quantum. And humans are very quantum creatures, right? So can you tell me a little bit more about the creativity part? It seems to me AI can't red team itself, right? Because that, to what you just talked about, it's that creativity. It's the like taking the least direct path where AI usually looks for the most direct path. So I'm just wondering if you can expand on that a little bit about why AI can't really red team itself. And if you agree with my kind of posture that there will always be a place for humans in security because it's that tangential and quantum kind of way of thinking that is what helps discover novel ideas.
Yeah. So, I mean, on that meta level of do we still need humans? Yeah, absolutely. Right. Like it is humans and machine. And specifically in this AI red teaming, there's some automation you can apply. And we start to see like basic checks being automatically done, right? So there's frameworks from Pyrite, Microsoft. I think Meta has a Purple Llama framework that is starting to gain some traction. So there's definitely automation opportunities to help at least make sure that new model iterations or new implementations of a particular generative AI model at least adhere to some of the basic standards. See it as an OWASP top 10 check, right? Like you're doing an audit against, do I have XSS and SQL injection? In this case, am I vulnerable to this basic jailbreak technique of hypothetical scenarios or role playing or other ways to trick the model into engaging in harmful conversation? So there's automation possible there, but where the human creativity comes in is just every single time coming up with a new novel technique that that the automation can't think of, right? Like I saw a successful technique again from someone who was basically asking the model, because the models can code now, right? Is to basically say, hey, can you write code? And that code will then ask the model specifically to tell me how to write a bomb as a basic prompt. And it worked, right? Like it wrote the code. it executed the code, it interpreted the code, and then it was like, oh yeah, of course I can tell you how to write it, how to make a bomb. Here's exactly how you do that. And it was just another way of like, yeah, of course, another way to bypass. So all that human creativity, that's what humans are good at, right? Like they have that ingenuity of, okay, there's a block in front of me, I see a way around.
Yeah,
I remember my first time through Gandalf. It took me 3 or 4 days, I think, to get to level 7 or level 8, or I don't think they had the level 8 yet. And I shared it with my partner, who is in tech but not in security. She's on the high performance computing side. She does stuff with supercomputers, and she goes through all 7 levels in like 45 minutes. And I was, so nerd as I am, like I documented how I got through each step, because like I wanted to see if techniques that worked at level 2 could maybe be tweaked and used at level 4 and stuff like that. So I've got this huge, long, just history, like my thoughts and, like stuff I tried that didn't work, stuff I tried that did work, because one of the things I noticed is something that works in level 4 when I do it, somebody who goes and tries it the next day, maybe it doesn't work that day. Right. Because it's non-deterministic, maybe because the defenses are evolving behind the scenes. But when I looked at all hers, they were way simpler than mine. I was overthinking things so much. And I was just kind of blown away at how simple some of these jailbreaks are.
Yep.
Yeah, that's I think with Gandalf, the first time I ran through Gandalf, I picked a technique, and I think I forget the exact technique, but I just randomly thought of a technique, and it worked all the way through level 6, I think. And it's like, oh, okay. And then at level 6, it started to get hard. I'm like, oh, okay, how do I get around this? But the first technique I just thought of randomly, which wasn't something I researched at all. I just thought of something, and it worked all the way through level 6. So it just shows like all the human creativity that we have to be able to think of, what did the developer not think of that I am thinking of right now is still super valuable.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, like AI comes up with stuff we would never think of, right? Because it doesn't, if we can say that it think like us, like it comes up with a strategy for Go that no human has ever tried. And it certainly comes up with images I think no human would ever think of. And I wish I hadn't seen, right? Like,
yeah.
some AI generated stuff I could have lived my life without seeing. But
fingers are the ones for me that are just
horror shows. Like it doesn't know
like everything everywhere all at once. Like
it doesn't know how disturbing, emotionally some of that is for us. It's just trying to do its best, right?
Yeah. Well, I love also that it can't, because so much of the internet is Russian. When you ask it to generate any photo that's got any type of alphabet in it, even if it's in English, it just can't help itself but to throw a few Russian characters in there.
That's funny.
It's always my favorite.
It does. It still has a hard time with text and images. If you want some kind of text and images, I see a lot of it on LinkedIn too, where security is never spelled correctly. Right? It's got an extra I in there or something like that.
There's like a weird space between the I and the T that nobody can explain.
Yeah.
Try vulnerability in an AI generated image.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
Too long a word. That's asking for too much.
Well, the retrieval augmentation is always interesting to me as well, because being old and having been on the internet since my computer went, every time I got a message, like the internet started out as a joke. Like it was like you would never put your real name on the internet, like forums and all of, like, if you think about Reddit, or like I used to race motorcycles, right? And I was on a forum for motorcycle racing. So much of the internet is like sarcasm, is intentionally wrong answers. And I think about that all the time with retrieval augmented generation, and that AI really can't tell the difference between misinformation, sarcasm, snarkiness, like things like that. Yeah. So like my motorcycle forum, we used to, when somebody would ask about like performance or something like that, as a joke, the first answer would always be, try pouring 3 cups of sugar into your gas tank. And so like, how does AI know that we're just being snarky and sarcastic, especially when that answer comes up like 50% of the time someone asks a question about performance, right? And so I think we're trying to address this with agentic AI and kind of giving these agents smaller pools of data so that they're not just Googling and trying to figure out what's going on in the world. But it's always interesting to me in that like the people don't really kind of think about what the internet is made of, and it's not made of things from the encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Right. Like it might, you might need to run another prompt over the output and ask it, does this make sense?
Yeah.
Right. Because then it would conclude, yeah, glue on a pizza does not make sense.
Or that you can melt an egg.
Right. And it can do that stuff, but I've noticed never in the same prompt. Those have to be two separate prompts. Like you can't ask it for an answer to a question, or you can't ask it for code and check for vulnerabilities in the code in the same prompt. You can ask it for code. It will give you code. Then you can say, remove the vulnerabilities from the code, and it will actually remove some of the vulnerabilities from the code. But you can't do it you can't ask it to do two things at once.
That's dangerous, right? Like if we think about how much code is going to be AI generated, is everyone going to ask in a second prompt, now remove all the vulnerabilities from the stuff you just generated? That's, yeah.
Well, or are you sure you didn't pull this from a licensed or trademarked GitHub or Stack Overflow? Are you sure you didn't pull this from the XZ utils that has a supply chain vulnerability in it? That's the stuff that really is kind of scary to me is, there's all of these snippets of code that exist out there, and AI is not really doing a great job of saying, well, here's a piece you can use. And even as a data scientist, the first model I turned in for user and entity behavior analytics caught a bunch of Trojans, but my CEO had to completely rewrite the code because it was like Swiss cheese from a security perspective. Because I didn't go through any type of security training as a data scientist. They taught me how to build models. So, I think like even from the basic, like your AI source code may not be as secure as you want it to be. It's entirely possible there are management interfaces exposed to the internet because as a data scientist, I just made the S3 bucket public so I could pull it in. Yeah. So this is such a multi-layered thing that it's just fascinating to me because I think, we want to apply all of these human characteristics to AI and assume that it has motives and intentions, that it's literally just connecting dots like autocorrect. And
right.
Yeah, we just can't see all of the dots it's connecting.
But especially with RAG, RAG over the internet digs up a lot of interesting nuggets that have been spread all over the internet, right? But if you do it over an enterprise data set, right? Like someone's wiki, their drive and all other files and everything, there's going to be files in there that have sensitive content that you didn't think existed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Passwords.txt. Oh, I didn't know we had that on our SharePoint drive. Oops. It's going to be
people
ragged into someone's prompt and disclosed that way.
Database is powering the website that you can't see behind the UI. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, something I wanted to kind of highlight or go a little bit deeper on before we wrap up here, Michiel, is, one of the things we were talking about is because it's non-deterministic. I mentioned earlier, like you won't break it in the first attempt, but maybe the second or the third, or we were talking about building up over time. And a lot of these automated tools, like you mentioned, Microsoft's Pirate, there's Prompt Foo is another good one that's out there that has kind of like a free tier to it. I don't know how you automate or how you program for some of that. If the first prompt doesn't give you the result you want, sometimes it's the second, sometimes it's the third, or you have to build up to it. So it seems like, either we've got to kind of change, if we want to automate it, we're going to have to change our approach there, or we're just going to be dependent on still needing humans to poke at it every now and then, right? The automated stuff will only take us so far. Does that, do you agree with that?
Yeah, so I would say the automated parts are going to get us to at least aligning with some level of best practice, right? But just in vulnerability scanning world, for instance,
practice. Because clearly it's not best when it only gets better, right?
Right. So, but the analogy would be vulnerability scanning, right? Everyone does at least basic vulnerability scanning. It's an easy way to find issues quickly. Is it going to find everything? No, right? You still deploy other ways of trying to find vulnerabilities, which include human pen testing, right? To find at least all the possible vulnerabilities, and you do your homework.
Yeah, it makes sense.
On the specifically with the AI red teaming, when you test for a specific scenario, maybe like an example would be what's really important for some of the foundation model companies is you don't want to engage detailed, sustained conversation around CBRN, right? So chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear risk. So those are kind of topics you want to steer away from. But then how do you evaluate if the model interaction is actually a detailed conversation, right? Because we, for instance, could be having a conversation with a chatbot about how do I store a dangerous toxin safely. And you want the model to not be spitting out all sorts of details on how you do that. But what's too much detail, right? If the model says, well, you should store it in a container, that's probably not enough detail, and probably an okay and not a harmful response. But then if it goes into the direction of, well, you should do it in a temperature controlled room, it should be this temperature, this kind of container is the best way to do that in, you should think about ventilation of the room, here's systems to do that with, and it's being too helpful, right? You need to kind of make that determination of when is it too much detail? And that's another way that kind of becomes hard to automate, right? Because it's not really, it's a little bit subjective on deciding.
It's also a little bit of a slippery slope, right? Because who decides what's too much detail and what people are entitled to know?
Yep.
So that's the other part of the human aspect of it that I wanted to mention. Every time I advise a company on this, I tell them, you're going to have people looking at prompts, because when somebody's trying to jailbreak, it's super obvious when you see it. It looks very shady. It like clearly they're trying to get it to do something it shouldn't be doing. And I don't see a way to automate defenses against that. So I think at some level you're still going to need a human, in the SOC or somewhere looking at this stuff and looking for some of those patterns.
Yeah.
Goes back to the art of war, right? Until the attackers decide to take the rest of the year off and just use AI, we're not going to be able to defend with AI without humans.
Yeah. All right. Well, we do have in the show notes a couple of good links, good posts here about some of the companies that you've worked with to set up AI red teaming bug bounties. So interesting stuff there. Anything else you wanna wrap up with or point people to before we let you go?
Yeah, I think one of the programs to check out that is very open and public is Anthropic's program, where they're paying pretty competitive rewards for anyone who's identifying novel jailbreaks in their Claude models.
Give AI a black eye and get paid for it. Sounds good.
Love it.
All right, Michiel, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. Very fun conversation.
Enjoyed it very much. Thanks so much.
All right, stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk running an open source business with Francis Dinha from OpenVPN.